The DMV should stick to handing out licenses and doing eye tests, and the medical profession, for the first time in a generation, should focus exclusively on helping and treating people. In every single state in the country, when you go to the DMV to get your driver's license, you're asked whether you want to become an organ donor. And this is how the vast majority of people, more than 90% of them, end up on the National Registry of Organ Donors. And usually people are happy to sign on. It's seen as a pretty unambiguous act of virtue. In fact, it's long been seen as the most virtuous act that can possibly take place at a DMV, which, admittedly isn't saying much. And most people don't really think about it. They just check the box yes on the theory that one day if they end up in a horrible accident and they die, then their organs could be used to save a life. But if you think about it for a second, as many so-called conspiracy theorists, quote unquote, have done over the years, a lot of questions begin to emerge. For one thing, why exactly are we pairing organ donation with getting a driver's license? I mean, no other government program works like this. Even with the motor voter law, there are still a handful of DMVs that don't ask about voter registration. Organ donation stands alone as the only issue that every DMV, without exception, is fixated on. Aside from actually driving. They're not interested in signing up for a gym or helping you file your taxes or making sure you know how to service your car or finding you a quality gutter cleaner or any of that. Human organs are the one thing on their mind. There also aren't any other major medical decisions that they expect you to make on the spot when you go for your driver's license. Like they don't try to upsell you on a root canal or LASIK eye surgery or anything else. Organ donation, again, stands alone. Now, you might say that, well, a lot of people die in car accidents and it's good to have a plan B for their organs. So that's not creepy at all. But if that's the reason, it's strange that the DMV doesn't pester you to, say, hire an attorney to draft your will, just in case you die in a horrible car accident. Nor does the DMV bother you to check to see if you have good health insurance, which is obviously pretty important if you get into a wreck. The DMV doesn't care about any of that. They just want you to sign up to have your organs taken away in case you die. Now, the legal basis for the DMV's question is found within the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act, which was backed by every major medical organization. This law encourages states to add organ donors to a national registry. It was first passed in the 60s, but it's been revised several times, most recently in 2006. And the latest version of the law, quote, expanded the list of persons who can consent to organ donation on behalf of an individual, gave every individual the opportunity to donate the organs at or near death, and stated that individuals who refuse to donate must explicitly state that. In other words, because not enough organs were being donated, the law changed from opt-in to opt-out. And the legal presumption is that you want to gift your organs to strangers. Now, as they watched organ donation become a bigger and bigger priority for the government, a small and highly skeptical group of people wondered whether all of these major medical organizations and lawmakers might have a conflict of interest. After all, organ transplants are extremely lucrative procedures. A double lung transplant can easily cost $2 million. A liver transplant can run over $1 million. Kidney transplants, which are kind of the bargain bin of the organ donation world, cost merely hundreds of thousands of dollars. So given all these numbers, it's reasonable to ask whether a hospital, when confronted with a seriously ill patient who happens to be an organ donor, might have an incentive to murder that patient, or at least let them die, or at least not give them all the care that they otherwise would. There's a lot of money on the line. It's certainly reasonable to ask what safeguards are in place to prevent something like that from happening exactly. Now, go on the website of the Mayo Clinic, which is supposedly the #1 hospital in the world, and you'll find an entire page that's devoted to reassuring skeptics about organ donation. But the page doesn't do a very good job. Instead, it simply states, quote, myth, if I agree to donate my organs, the hospital staff won't work as hard to save my life. Fact, when you go to the hospital for treatment, the healthcare team tries to save your life, not someone else's. You get the best care you can get. Close quote. Well, that's that. The Mayo Clinic promises that you'll get the best care. No one in the hospital would ever dream of killing you or letting you die so they can harvest your organs. And you'll just have to take their word for it. And if you can't trust the sterling reputation of America's leading medical experts, then who can you trust? And you'll notice, of course, that this is a common theme in the fact-checking industry. People who are skeptical of the official narrative will find that their skepticism is, quote-unquote, debunked by the fact-checkers, simply repeating the official narrative. As it turns out, though, once again, we have been lied to. And once again, the so-called conspiracy theorists were right. At hospitals all over the country, new reporting reveals And there's now a federal investigation being launched into this, to look into this by the HHS. This new reporting reveals that patients are indeed being rushed into surgery to remove their organs, even when they're still alive. And we're not talking about one or two cases here. This is a systemic problem. It's also an inevitable problem given the way that the incentives have been set up. Consider the story of a Kentucky man named TJ Hoover. Back in 2021, doctors said that he was brain dead. They convinced the family to remove his life support so that his organs could be harvested. Meanwhile, according to an employee with the organ procurement company named Nikki Martin, Hoover was actually displaying signs of life, including tracking with his eyes, moving around, trying to pull his tube out, trying to pull his hands away. But the family apparently wasn't told about any of those signs of life, and Hoover was ultimately brought to an operating room so that his organs could be harvested. But just before his life support was cut off and the surgery began, Hoover woke up. And then even after he woke up, the organ harvesters at Kentucky Organ Donor Alliances, or CODA, reportedly weren't deterred. The harvesters were still dead set on finding a doctor to perform the surgery on this guy who just woke up. That's according to one medical professional who was in the operating room with TJ Hoover. Watch.
What you are watching is the honor walk. It's one of the most revered traditions in a hospital. It's when family, friends, and staff all pay their respects as someone is wheeled off to give the ultimate gift, donation of their organs.
It's okay. Sometimes they
Except this man, TJ Hoover, was still very much alive.
So we did track down someone who was in the operating room that day and did see what happened firsthand. Her name is Natasha Miller. She's a transplant perfusionist, and I'm driving to see her now. From what I understand, he was mouthing the word no and pushing hands away and things like that.
Yes, he was very aware. The pronouncing physician comes in, and when she comes in, she walks back out and she says, "I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this case. I don't feel comfortable." The organ coordinator that was there, she steps out to call the supervisor at the time to tell him that the pronouncing physician was refusing to do the case. She said that he was yelling at her, telling her she needed to find another physician to come. And she's like, there is no one. There's no one else to come do this case.
Is there any part of this that makes sense to you? Is any part of this defensible?
No, because it seemed like at first they were saying, well, family consented. And I get that. But again, it seems like family wasn't made fully aware of his actual state. None of it makes sense. We should have never went to OR.
I was a registered organ donor and I'm not anymore.
Really? Because you don't trust the system?
I don't trust the system.
What is TJ's life like now?
He wasn't supposed to make it a year, if he made it.
Hold your head up, bub.
For TJ, it's not just about being alive, but living and getting to be a part of these moments. Like walking his sister down the aisle.
The organ harvesting company CODA has denied all wrongdoing. They said that they don't get any kickbacks when organs are harvested, and they claim that all the procedures were followed. But when you listen to the testimony of the former CODA employee who was in the operating room, the company's denial isn't exactly convincing. And on top of that, if you can follow procedures and still come close to ripping the organs out of a living patient, then obviously the procedures need to change. And that shouldn't be controversial in any way to say. America is back. Thanks to President Trump and leader John Thune's working family tax cuts, we stopped the biggest tax hike in history. That's only the beginning. The big, beautiful bill also cuts taxes on tips and overtime, secures the border, finishes the wall, and protects Medicaid for Americans, not illegals. Leader Thune and Senate Republicans got President Trump's conservative agenda done, providing real relief for every hardworking American that's up early and home late. We're bringing manufacturing jobs back home, and we're making America great again. Tell Leader John Thune and Senate Republicans, thank you for delivering President Trump's agenda. Learn more at onenationamerica.org. That's especially true given that, as horrible as TJ Hoover's situation was, the organ harvesting industry has been involved in operations that are somehow even more horrifying than that. In some cases, the mistake wasn't caught in time. We're talking about, situations where the surgical operation began even though the patient wasn't dead. Last May, for example, a 42-year-old woman named Misty Hawkins, who had a lifelong cognitive disability and lived with her mother in Alabama, choked on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and ended up in a coma. By the time doctors removed the obstruction, she had suffered severe oxygen deprivation and had to be hooked up to a ventilator. And that's when the doctors reportedly gave the mother a choice. She had 72 hours to decide whether she wanted to terminate life support and donate the organs or send her daughter to a nursing home. And the mother decided to let her daughter die on the theory that she didn't want her to suffer. And here's what happens next. This is from the New York Times report that just came out. Quote, in the operating room, a hospital doctor took Miss Hawkins off the ventilator and gave her drugs for comfort. The doctor declared her dead 103 minutes later, near the outer limit of organ viability. The surgeons entered the room. They began operating after a 5-minute waiting period. All circulatory death donations require a waiting period to ensure the heart does not restart. Almost immediately, they saw Miss Hawkins' heart moving. Records from the procurement organization also noted subsequent gasping respirations, a type of breathing. The surgeon stopped and left the room. Another doctor sewed up Miss Hawkins. It's unclear if she was given any anesthetic. 12 minutes later, she was again declared dead. Now, nobody informed Hawkins' family about any of this, according to the Times. They just told the family that her organs turned out to be unusable. It took more than a year for the family to learn what had actually happened, and they made the discovery by talking to the New York Times. Something similar happened to Hoover's family in Kentucky. For all the respect that these hospitals supposedly have for organ donors, they became extremely quiet and secretive when things go bad. In Hawkins' case, doctors interviewed by the Times assessed that it was, quote, all but impossible that her heart restarted after the waiting period. So in other words, the doctors were probably wrong when they declared that she was dead. It looks a lot like she was alive. And despite that inconvenient detail, the doctor started carving her up, presumably without providing anesthetic, because supposedly this person was dead. And this isn't something you think a hospital could possibly mess up, but apparently that's what happened. And again, it's not particularly uncommon. There are plenty of cases just like this one. Quoting again from the Times, quote, in 2022, when she was 38 and homeless, Miss Gallegos was hospitalized and went into a coma. Doctors at Presbyterian Hospital in Albuquerque told her family that she would never recover. On the day of the planned donation, Miss Gallegos was taken to a pre-surgery room where her two sisters held her hand. A doctor arrived to withdraw life support. Then a sister announced that she had seen Miss Gallegos move. The doctor asked her to blink her eyes, and she complied. The room erupted in gasps. Still, hospital workers said the procurement organization wanted to move forward. A coordinator said it was just reflexes and suggested morphine to reduce movements. The hospital refused. Instead, workers brought her back to her room, and she made a full recovery. Yes, just seconds before they were about to kill this woman and harvest her organs, the family noticed that she was still alive. And then, even after the family pointed this out, the organ harvesting organization still wanted to cut her organs out. And now she's fine. And yet, through all of this, no one has been arrested or fed to the alligators. No one suffered any consequences at all for trying to harvest the organs of a person they knew was alive. Stories like this led the Trump administration to investigate the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network, which administers the organ transplant program that Congress established. The administration looked into a relatively small number of incidents, a total of 351 cases where organ donation was authorized, but ultimately not completed. And here's what they found. Quote, the 103 cases, 29.3%, showed concerning features, including 73 patients with neurological signs incompatible with organ donation. At least 28 patients may not have been deceased at the time organ procurement was initiated, raising serious ethical and legal questions. Evidence pointed to poor neurologic assessments, lack of coordination with medical teams, questionable consent practices, and misclassification of causes of death, particularly in overdose cases. Vulnerabilities were highest in small and rural hospitals, indicating systemic gaps in oversight. Okay, so to repeat, according to this data, 73 patients had neurological signs incompatible with organ donation, and at least 28 patients may not have been deceased at the time organ procurement was initiated. And this is just based on an investigation of 351 cases where organ procurement was authorized but not completed. We're not looking at the cases where it was completed. In nearly 10% of those cases, and potentially as many as 20% of them, the patient wasn't actually dead. Keep in mind, these are the most conservative estimates we have. The real figures are almost certainly even worse. And nothing on the Mayo Clinic's webpage on organ donation talks about any of this, nor will the DMV inform you of these statistics when you go to renew your license. Instead, as is so often the case, the conspiracy theorists on social media will give you more accurate information than official expert sources will. Once again, the conspiracy theorists were onto something. just as they were about masks and social distancing, the COVID shot, Wuhan lab leak, and so on and so on and so on and so on. This is yet another blow to the credibility of the expert medical establishment, which, unlike many of the patients whose organs they want to harvest, has been dead and gone for a very long time. The least credible people on the planet have been proven to be liars once again. And that's not the only reason that we shouldn't be surprised by these revelations. In every other context, the medical industry already treats human beings like lab rats and or commodities. And we've seen this again and again with abortion and euthanasia, so-called gender-affirming care, and so on. Doctors who don't value the dignity of human life will eagerly commit unspeakable horrors in the name of ideology or profit or both. And they'll do it without any hint of shame whatsoever. They'll tell anti-lockdown protesters to stay home while they encourage BLM rioters to flood the streets. They'll carve up the bodies of young children, even as they privately admit that those children can't consent. And as we're seeing now, they'll slice open the chest of an organ donor who's not even dead, and then they'll get angry when the organ donor wakes up in the middle of the operation. Thanks to a law that's been adopted by every state, your local DMV, the lady at your local DMV wants you to ignore all of this. She wants you to believe that really all these incidents aren't a big deal. And even if they seem like outtakes from a Saw movie, we just don't worry about it. Just sign on the dotted line and like any good and decent person would and become an organ donor. After all, how could it possibly be a bad idea to be an organ donor? That'd be like saying it's a bad idea to save a helpless puppy, the kind they show on TV as that Sarah McLachlan song plays, or at least they used to. And for most of this country's history, the DMV lady would have a point, but the DMV lady doesn't have a point anymore. Give immoral people a position of power, and they'll corrupt everything they can. Put the medical industry in the position of taking lives intentionally, as they do with abortion, euthanasia. You've created all kinds of conflicts of interest already. You've turned the medical field into something that doesn't just treat and help people, but in fact intentionally harms and kills them in some cases. They'll turn unambiguous acts of virtue, like agreeing to be an organ donor, into a catastrophic blunder that can get you murdered in an operating room. That's what the people running some of the most powerful hospitals and medical organizations in the country have done. As a result of their corruption, here's the stark choice that we're left with the next time we go to the DMV to get our license renewed. We can either make it harder for people to receive organs they need, or we can sign a license to have doctors butcher us in the operating room while we're still alive. Yeah, those are the choices, and there's no good option. That will remain true until the people responsible for all these cases I mentioned, and many cases I didn't mention, are criminally investigated and, if appropriate, charged for what they've done. There needs to be a full accounting here. Absolute transparency is necessary, along with actual consequences. And until that time comes, no one, especially not the DMV lady, should be doing the bidding of these surgeons and organ harvesters. The DMV should stick to handing out licenses and doing eye tests, and the medical profession, for the first time in a generation, should focus exclusively on helping and treating people, instead of wantonly destroying even more human life for profit. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.